G'day YouTube. This week we're going to be talking about how some bad science can quickly enter the public understanding of a subject and become science fact before it's actually been proven. I'm going to be talking about menstruation, standing desks, and climate change. I'm Nate, and this is n8thiest. That'll do. Okay, move on. Perfect. There are a lot of myths surrounding menstruation, and men are fairly responsible for a lot of the misunderstanding about what happens when Aunt Flo comes to visit. I mean, just the fact that we have so many euphemisms for surfing the crimson wave shows just how uncomfortable we are with Leak Week. But it's not always men that are to blame for the myths surrounding the receipt of your monthly subscription. In 1971, Martha McClintock published a paper regarding menstrual synchrony, in which she describes how women in close proximity find that their cycles become aligned over time. It garnered a lot of support because she used human pheromones as a mechanism. It was a hot new topic and the media ate it up. And pretty quickly the public got on board. Unfortunately for Martha, some people disagreed with her conclusions and attempts to recreate her work often came out with varied results. Turns out there's no actual evidence to support her theory. I mean, if it was true, you'd expect that every single female prison across the world would find that its inmates were perfectly in sync, and that's simply not the case. Instead, what we have here is a problem of maths and pattern recognition and the way the human brain works. When we talk about menstruation, most of the time, unless you're taking urine or blood samples, the only way to tell if a woman is menstruating is by self-reporting. You need to ask her. Some women will say that they know when their body starts menstruating, and so may report a day earlier or a day later than the actual start and stop times are. Add into that the period goes for somewhere between 2 and 7-ish days, at least that's what's considered normal, on a 28-ish day cycle. If you take two randomly selected women, you should find, just by statistics, that they'll continuously go in and out of sync. Think about it like when you're at the lights and indicating to turn right, say. The car in front of you has an indicator too. You'll notice sometimes your indicators are in sync and sometimes they're not. Add in some confirmation bias where people are more likely to remember events that support their conclusions and forget the ones that don't, and you've got a myth ready to go. So it's really just down to numbers rather than pheromones. Talking about eggs, kinda. So you know how the advice for eating eggs seems to change every 3 minutes? The reason for that's pretty simple. Quite a few people eat eggs, and most people care about their health. That means anytime a paper is published that describes either an adverse health effect or some kind of health benefit of eating eggs, the media jumps on board. It attracts readers. The problem with this is that it means that people don't always understand what's going on and don't always have a complete picture. Anyone who's familiar with pop science news websites and other media outlets has heard about the standing desk. It's a desk that you stand to work at instead of sitting. Standing to work results in increased energy expenditure, which can assist with weight loss. It also improves back pain and posture and avoids all the other nasty side effects of sitting, of which there are a few, including reduced production of lipoprotein lipase, which is linked to heart disease. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. A quick Google Scholar search will throw up tons of papers telling you all about the evils of sitting. My favourites blame sitting on adverse effects on all types of mortality. Yeah. It sounds scary. I mean, like eating eggs, a lot of us spend a lot of time sitting. Now, the reason I'm having a go at the standing desk isn't to say that it has no benefits, but I just want to talk for a second about how reporting of science can change the way we think about things. If you look further into Google Scholar, you'll find there's also quite a few papers talking about how bad standing can be. Standing for long periods of time has been linked to back pain, knee pain, foot pain, varicose veins, and carotid atherosclerosis, which can lead to myocardial infarction, heart attack. So if you sit for long periods of time, you are increasing your risk of heart disease. If you stand for long periods of time, you increase your risk of heart disease. So you can see how this could be very confusing, and I can imagine a situation where standing desks kind of end up like eggs. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. It'll just depend on what science is most popular at the time and what the media is reporting on. I think the best advice here is everything in moderation. So sit for a bit and break it up by standing for a bit. And vice versa. I mean, anyone who's on their feet for 8 hours a day knows the value of a good sit down. At the end of the day, we bend that way, so it's okay. The thing is, you just got to remember that media doesn't always provide you with the balance that you deserve. Even when the media tries to achieve balance, it doesn't always get it right. See, balance isn't just about showing alternative opinions. A fairly balanced argument puts the alternatives under the same sort of scrutiny as the research of scientists. Climate and weather are two very different things. Weather works on scales of minutes to weeks, whereas climatologies have to be determined over a minimum period of about 30 years. This helps to minimise the impact of outliers like heat waves and cold snaps. Calls like, "Polar vortex, where's your global warming now?" and the equally bad, "Heat wave, that global warming's really bad today," show just how little some people understand about climate change. I mean, the atmosphere is a lumbering beast with a lot of inertia. It takes a lot to get it moving. And the scary thing is that it also takes a lot to slow it down. The arguments of people who disagree with human-induced climate change are usually pretty weak and pretty easily debunked. It's really just a matter of misunderstanding of the scientific process and the science that's behind the results that have been found. Part of the problem is the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's issued 4 reports over the last 24 years, with the 5th one to be released later on this year in full, which I'm very excited about. And over that time, its opinions have changed somewhat. It's become a lot more definite about the impacts that humans have had on the climate. Deniers often point to this and say, conspiracy! But that's just not the case. The IPCC's report that's being released this year will be including climatology data from the last 30 years. Back in the 1990s, when its first report was released, it was looking at data from the 60s. We've pumped a lot of carbon into the atmosphere over that time, and any increase in the events of severe weather phenomena are now starting to pile up and move the numbers. But pointing to the IPCC's changing perspective on the science isn't the same as saying that the science is invalid. And that's part of the problem. When you use people who have these views as a counterpoint to the real science, you're really presenting a point of view that isn't valid and isn't tested. It may be a balance of sorts, but it's certainly an unfair one. Sort of like pitting evolutionists against creationists. You're not really talking about the same things. And us humans, we're not always the best at discerning between a viable evidence-based argument and a persuasive one that's filled with belief and opinion rather than fact. The astute among you may have noticed that I haven't done an On This Day yet. Well, it's coming, but I wanted to let you know that the reason I've been talking about menstruation and standing desks and the weather might seem a bit odd, but they were actually inspired from this week's On This Day. So you've got a quick 5 seconds to try to figure out what the On This Day for this week might be. I don't know any good thinking music. Did you get it? This week's On This Day is about the periodic table of the elements. So, on this day, the 6th of March back in 1869, Siberian-born Russian chemist and inventor Dmitri Mendeleev presented the first periodic table of the elements to the Russian Chemical Society. Dmitri published his table in 1871. Before that, we didn't really understand the story of the elements and how they all fit together. Now, he may have had a few things missing and he might have got a few things in the wrong order, but Dmitri used it to successfully predict the discovery of gallium, germanium and scandium. That's pretty impressive. The table we use today wasn't formalised until 2012 when we added fluorovium, element 114, and livermorium, element 116. And it's not finished yet. We're still missing ununpentium, that's a designation for element 115. Ununseptium was discovered in 2010 by some Russian scientists, that's element 117. And ununoctium, element 118, we think we found, but we've only got 3 or maybe 4 atoms of it. That's not much. The problem is once we get up to these heavier elements, we've got to synthesize them, and half-lives get shorter and shorter the higher you go. Ununoctium has a half-life of less than a millisecond, which makes it pretty tough to pin down. Dimitri's table is still being used today, and it's provided us with so much understanding about physics and chemistry and about the natural world in general. Scientists are still trying to fill it up, and probably will be for some time to come. So thanks, Dmitri, great job. And that's all the time we've got for this week. So if you like what you've seen, hate what you've seen, or if I got something wrong, please let me know. Leave a comment below or tweet me at @NateByrne. That's at the letter N, the number 8, BYRNE, and use the hashtag n8thiest. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to encourage me to make more videos, and links for all of the stuff I've talked about are in the description box below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next week. That means at any time why can't I speak properly?